All right, what's up, guys? Belton here, back with part two, discussing how the new auction house will work in the Settlers of Kalguur. If you missed the first part of this series here, you can check that out, and I will link the video below. In that video, we are reacting to the reveal that GGG recently put out last night, discussing some of the implementations of the auction house, the functionality side of it, how it's going to work, etc. Obviously, elaborating on what they revealed in the league announcement and what they posted on their website so far. So in the first part of the video, we watched the 5-minute sort of teaser they put out, provide some context there. And in this video, I will be giving my thoughts, sort of summarizing the totality of what has been presented by GGG so far with respect to the auction house or the marketplace that is coming in the next league, 3.25. And we're going to be breaking this into sort of 4 sections here. And these 4 sections will be the good, so what I think is good about what's coming. They've announced what I think might be bad, sort of question marks, or the not yet known. And then some suggestions that I have to kind of combat some of the potential issues that I could see arising. And so we'll be going through that one at a time. At certain points, GGG in their interview with Ziggy D actually makes a reference to certain financial terms. And at some points, I will probably kind of connect that into it as well. And discuss the things that exist in like equities trading or day trading or stock trading or whatever, that has obviously some cross application. And again, these are some terms that they reference themselves in that interview, but also perhaps can give a better or easier to understand framework for some of the potential problems or even benefits that could come from this auction house as they've explained it. So with that being said, we'll jump right into it here. And the first thing that we'll talk about, what did I think that was good about this? So things that they've discussed that I think are just universally beneficial. First and foremost being the asynchronous trading. Obviously is fantastic. When you're online, this is great. But in particular, the fact that you can sell when you're offline is awesome, right? So especially if you're from a place in the world that does not align with the prime time of PoE. If you go and look on the concurrent player numbers on something like Steam, you'll notice that within a 24-hour cycle, it peaks, valleys, peaks, valleys, peaks, valleys. Your EU and North America are the more, like the peak hours for them are around the nighttime for them. But once you get past 2 a.m. in North American Eastern Standard Time, so Europeans are either just waking up or it's very early in the morning or going to work. Most North Americans are asleep, so it's kind of prime time for the Asiatic countries and Australia and stuff. The player numbers tend to be quite low, and the price of everything tends to be quite a bit higher. So not only does there, the practical application that everyone can benefit from the offline stuff, but also from the places of the world where they kind of just get screwed by their time zone in terms of overall market availability. That's fantastic for them. The next part is that orders can be partially filled or progressively withdrawn as they fill. You do lose your gold cost if you do this, but it does mean that if you put up a really, really large buy order, let's say you wanted to start crafting something that needed like 2,500 alterations on average, but it's the beginning of a league. You don't need to find somebody who is individually selling 2,500 alterations. It'll start filling up like a little meter going through, right? So you could get, if there's a seller who has 25 and it's the cheapest one, it'll buy the 25. And then if the next one guy's selling like 60, it'll buy those 60. And you'll see the total amount going up as it goes through. And at any point, you can withdraw those and you can take that partial fill. It doesn't have to be totally done. When it is fully filled, there'll be a notification and you can take it all out. But as I said here, you can fill it, you can withdraw it as it's being progressively done. But again, if you do take it out early, you'll still lose, you won't be reimbursed the gold cost for the total order. But again, if you just want to jump into some crafting, or if you don't want to wait the duration, or if perhaps you're being priced out of the market, it's still an option at least. Another beneficial thing is that the instant currency transfer between the user interface and the actual auction house, or your inventory in the auction house. So being able to just control and click and have it jump through and have it go right back to your inventory, as well as being able to pull that from your stash is great. The fact previously in this current league with Necropolis, you're able to control shift click and just put something from your inventory to the trade window, but you couldn't do that from your inventory to the stash which was quite frustrating. That's now going to be possible, both to the stash and also the same to the auction house, both withdrawing and adding it in. Save yourself lots of clicking, especially obviously because currency items tend to be the things that you'd have to click the most. Faustus, who will be the NPC that controls the auction house, he can be invited to your hideout like several other masters are, and that means you can have the auction house within your hideout directly. There's a lot of the currency items that are available still. Pretty much most of the things that are on the bulk trade site as it appears currently. So on like pathofexile.com/trade, most of those are on there. And so there's still a wide availability of things that you can get asynchronously. Another beneficial thing is that the gold cost that they have added to this should help with terms of service breaches and illegitimate accounts, either botting or RMTing. The vast majority of that kind of illegal activity takes place because Path of Exile is a free-to-play game, and you can make as many accounts as you want. The vast majority of those things take place on as low-level characters as possible, with the idea that they are going to get banned at some point. So the idea, obviously, from someone who is performing some sort of illegitimate activity would be to spend as little, obviously, real money. They don't spend any in most cases, and to spend as little time as possible, right? And the implementation of gold, especially the way that they have scaled it, with low-level content dropping almost none, mid-level content, which is what they said it's balanced around, allowing you to trade, and end-game content, they said, is basically going to trivialize the gold, which means that, again, it's punitive against people that would be doing it for, again, what I would define as illegitimate reasons. It'll work basically in parity, by the sounds of it, with the people around, mid-level. And then at the end game, it's not really a preventative thing for someone like myself or other people who do tons of trading. So it seems like it'll serve all three parties fairly well there. Now, obviously, there's going to be some kind of balancing and nuance required in that. They did say that this is sort of an experimental system, and you can't really see how the market's going to react until it's play tested by thousands and thousands of people. This is another thing that they mentioned in their interview with Ziggy D, which I agree with. And obviously, there's going to be some kinks, but at a base level, the idea is strong there. The auction house will also be able to pull directly from your stash, which is great. What that refers to is that your inventory obviously has 60 slots. So if you're trading a player, you can only do trades in max of, if it's something that stacks to 20, you can only trade 1,200 of them at once. But if you want to list or buy something like 5,000 alterations, right? You want to sell 5,000 alterations, you can do that, even though you can only have the 1,200 in your inventory. It'll take all the ones that are from your inventory if you did fill it out, but it'll pull the rest from your stash. This does not mean that you don't have to commit the items to the auction house to sell them. It just means that you're able to essentially put things on the auction house that are greater than the total amount of currency items that you could fit in your inventory just by itself. And another good thing too, I think, is that the regular trade site still exists. So if somebody does have a problem with the auction house, they find it irritating, they don't want to use the gold system, whatever it is, you still have the classic trade site. I do think that there's probably going to be less people using that, but some of the things that they discussed or seem to insinuate with their reveal is that the gold cost is primarily correlated to the total amount of currency items, which means that, buying one mirror, for example, and one alteration seemed, the way that they presented it, it seemed like those two things would be the same, right? But alterations, if you buy 1,000 of them, that's going to increase it 1,000 times the cost of one alteration. It didn't seem like they made no mention of it scaling based on the value of the currency. And so if you're buying something that's super cheap, like alterations or like augments or things like that, it might make more sense for some people to save their gold for maybe higher ticket currency items, and then use the regular trade site or trade one or whatever other means to do that. Essentially operating like the dark pool would, or dark pool trades like in the real world. So that's what I see as being the primary. There's obviously a lot more good that will come of this, but these are the major points that I made a note of while they were revealing this just through their video. So some of the things I saw as being potentially bad, I do want to make a note of it there. If you can see, there's obviously a lot more written with bad. That doesn't actually mean that I think on the whole, I want to clarify this. On the whole, I think the system is a great idea. The reason that there's more words, a higher word count for the bad suggestions, the unknown, is simply because there's elaborations on there. And I feel like you have to, when you call something bad, it needs more justification. This is not, it's not a balance of don't make it the false equivalency that more words means that there's more bad. And I'll elaborate on that now. Just to clarify, I do think on the whole this is a very positive thing. But anyways, what I consider to be potentially bad here is that many of the more irritating bulk items to buy are not included, namely beasts. The thing that I hate buying the most of any currency item or any item in all of Path of Exile, that is the absolute most irritating thing to buy, are rare beasts. Rare beasts don't have to be distinguished. I know that they can have different item levels, and that can impact a very, like, there are such a few amount of crafts that it actually impacts. And rare beasts the same, even though they have the same name. In many cases, it's just those, something like that, the omission of those I find very frustrating. Specifically for myself, that's just because I craft, but other things that are not on there are like maps, incubators, anything where they can sort of distinguish between one or another. They could have put white maps on there, but I guess distinguishing between white maps and magic or rare maps is just not their bag, so I guess quality could have impacted it as well too. For myself personally, I would have liked to be able to see that, like all the things that they have on the bulk website. I was kind of imagining in my head that everything that was on the bulk trade would be put into the currency auction house. I understand why they didn't do that, but some frustration with that too. And the next thing I saw as potentially being bad is that the gold cost is centered around mid game, being largely trivial at end game. This means that people manipulating the market and playing the auction house will still happen. For myself, I don't particularly mind this, but for a lot of people, I think that the perception on their end is that this is going to get rid of hideout warriors or get rid of flippers or get rid of people that are manipulating the market. In a lot of ways, I think this actually could exacerbate that issue. And GGG's word choice is very important to factor in here. When GGG refers to, and this is verbatim on their end, it'll largely be trivial at endgame content. Trivial was the word they use. GGG's perspective and their playtesting is never done from like someone who's a super hardcore player. Hardcore referring to like the amount of time they play and effort and like perhaps skill level or strength of character or currency, whatever. You know what I mean? I'm not referring to the league hardcore. When GGG refers to content as trivial, you have to keep in mind that the absolute hardest content that they have in the game, the most difficult possible thing, quite a few people are able to complete within a 24-hour period, right? So trivial is typically framed within the perspective of like the average player. And so when they say that getting gold at the end game is largely trivial, I do think that means that people are going to be able to actively play the market. They won't be able to do it infinitely, but I do think that the gold system is meant to prevent illegitimate stuff, not to prevent people wanting to trade and play the market. And now, obviously, being able to do so infinitely won't be possible, but I do think that is still going to be a very, very present part of the game. For some people, that might actually be a positive, but I think on the balance of power, most people would perhaps consider that a negative. The next thing that I saw as being bad, and I think that this is one that like straight up is a bad thing, items that are of lower volume or liquidity will be highly subject to manipulation and organized groups of individuals. So if you look at the way that they showed the trade being implemented in their video here, in fact, I will pull this up. On the screen here. The
Ray class students. Hi.
Well, that's the official trailer. Sorry, I left the wrong one there. Sorry for the delay here, yes? Currency
exchange beef, chaos orbs, and a number of your stash currency. This ratio shows the best possible of the best.
There we go. So this is the part that I think is perhaps the most problematic, and a lot of what we're going to cover here is going to center around really this right here. So you can see right here that the market, it'll show you a market ratio. It's the way that they've implemented this is the most user-friendly way that they can, which is good. Obviously, it's the least intimidating to get to get into, right? Very simple. I have X currency, I want X currency, and then they show you a market ratio, and then they've got a list of things right there. And I get that they're going for simplicity and for the translation of this to mass adoption. However, there's a reason why all of these second and tertiary technical indicators exist on Unreal trading. And I think a lot of the basic premises or pretenses that they have for this are potentially flawed. Also, this might just be a problem in terms of how they presented this. But as you can see in the video up above there, in their actual release, they show the best ratio as being 15 to 1. And then the second best is being 5.4 to 1, then 4.6 to 1, and then 4.6 to 1. Now, if I were to look on the trade site as it currently exists, and I saw one person with 15 to 1, and then 3 people with 5 to 1, I would think the first person was price fixing. And so this might just have been a dumb thing to show demonstrably. But I do think that this simple system here is going to lead to a lot of the issues. Now, not necessarily when it actually gets implemented, but at least in what they have explained so far. And I'll elaborate on that further. What they did mention, and they don't say this in the video here, I went and watched the Ziggy D interview to make sure of this, and this is where real world sort of terms are kind of important to understand. In real world financial markets, you have two kinds of basic order flows here. So they mentioned you can either have an order book. So if we look here, this is what an order book would look like if you were trading a stock. Right? And so a bid would be the same as the person putting out a buy order, and the ask would be the same as someone putting in a sell order. So you can see here that the bid at $9,139.60 has 3,151 total shares being potentially purchased at that price. So that is the total from all bidders at that price point. And then for the ask, the total amount of people selling, there's 167, and the best price that somebody's willing to sell for is $9,152.80. There's obviously a discrepancy of about $13 between those two things, right? So one of the good things I think that these guys did is that they put in, when you're trading stocks, there are two types of orders, basic orders. You can do either a market purchase or a limit order, a market order or a limit order. A limit order is when you put like this that we see here, where you put a maximum price that you are willing to purchase or pay to buy something, and then a minimum price that you are willing to sell something for. And until that price is hit, it will not make that transaction. A market purchase is where it will just, if you wanted to buy 100 shares, let's say, it would just buy 100 shares at the cheapest price available at that second. And so if you were to, because there can sometimes be a pretty big gap between the two things, as we can see here, it's a $13 gap. On $9,000, $9,100, it's not huge proportionately, but it's not nothing, especially if you're doing it in high volume. A market order can screw people over potentially. Now, so I think it's a very good thing that GGG didn't implement that. But the other kind that you could show, and sorry, to clarify, this is called an order book, right? Now, the U.S. Actually doesn't have this, but in Canada, you can see markets by order. So if you see here, you can see a bid offer and then the actual stack size. The actual implementation in PoE, where this would exist now, funnily enough, is the current trade site. So for some context,
Ratios available.
When you look at the trade site currently, right, it's going to show. You can see here, right? You can see each individual seller, right? So if you want to get something, we should choose something maybe a little bit more universal here. Why don't we go for Chaos Orbs, right? When you look up Chaos Orbs, you can see that this is a 120 to 1. You see 120 to 1, 121, 120 to 1, 120 to 1, but it breaks it apart by seller, right? So you can see the individual person's name. Now, if you were to frame that within the lens of what a order book shows, which is what the auction house in PoE now shows, right? An order book like this, instead of having being able to see each individual seller, this would be, so this top person has 120 and he's got 1200 chaos. So that means he could fill 10 orders. This person could fill 10 orders. This next person who's not AFK could fill 8 orders. So this would show 10, 20, 28, right? And so instead of showing each of the individual sellers with each of the individual listings that they have and the amount that are available, with the way that it's being demonstrated now with the order book, it would show it as the bid would be, the ask would be 28 at 120C or 110C or whatever it was, right? 120C. The only problem with that exists is that when you have a very high volume market, so like alterations or chaos orbs, where transactions are happening all of the time, that's going to be quite reflective of the actual market conditions, right? There's not really too high of a propensity for abuse or manipulation there, simply because of the volume of trading. But if you look here again, as they presented it, as they present it, right? They show, since they don't show the total amount of sellers, right? The only 2 indicators that they have here are the ratio and the stock. Now they do mention, they don't say this in the reveal video, but they do say this in the interview, that it is the top 5 book orders. And this is an important term to distinguish. It is not the top 5 orders. The top 5 orders would be the top 5 listings. If you say orders and listings, think of those synonymously. If you go on the trade site, the top 5 listings would be the 5 cheapest individual sellers. But the top 5 book orders would be, as I showed you with this one, the amalgam of all of the listings at a certain price point that are available at that price point. So when it says that there are 1,500 alterations available at 15 to 1, that means that could be one person selling 1,500 alts, or it could be 100 people selling 15 alts at the ratio of 15 to 1. Now, the problem that I see with this is that, and again, I don't really know why they chose this example, because it actually highlights the issue very clearly. If they don't show you how many people are actually, like how many sellers there are when they show the stock like that, if that was just one person selling 1,500 at 15 to 1, and then the next 3 are actually 50 people, the fact that there's 3 separate listings that are all around 5 to 1, but there's only one listing at 15 to 1, if you were looking at that on the trade site currently, as I mentioned earlier, you would think that the 15 to 1 were price fixing. However, PoE has an issue, not an issue, but it has a phenomena that is a universal experience. There are always more currency items being listed than are being bought. This is why inflation exists as a base state in PoE, right? There's always more currency entering than there is being taken out, especially early on in the league. And so if that were just one individual, that person could post it like that. And because you see on the top now, it shows the market ratio as being 15 to 1. A buy order could be purchased either by him or by somebody on his team, right? Where they might be selling 1,500 at 15 to 1, and they take that loss when the real ratio should be 5 to 1. But they could put up a buy order for 10,000 alterations at 15 to 1. And since the marketplace is being indicated by the seller, like if you're a naive seller coming on and you have 30 alts, and you're going to see the market price is 15 to 1. And because you can also do these partial fill orders, the potential for manipulation between 2 parties can be quite high, right? Now, this with alterations, it's not so much of an issue because alterations are very high volume, right? If you did post this, even if there were 1,500, that would probably sell instantly, right? Because like I'm sure most of you have experienced this before. If you put the cheapest price at the beginning of a league, as it is currently with the trade site, you get spammed 6,000 times, right? That spamming process is being automated into an automatic trade system. So you can imagine that that's going to happen very quickly. However, if anyone watching this video has ever found like a mirror or a Hinokora's lock or a tailoring or tempering orb in the first few days of the league, or on times where there's lower player numbers, you'll know that even if you put the cheapest price, you're not necessarily going to have that sell instantly. You're not going to have somebody message you right away, right? Now, because this is only showing the top 5 book order values, that means that if you have an organized group of individuals working together, the fact that it is not showing the total amount of sellers means that if you have a currency item that is not very high volume and that is not super liquid, like most of the higher value ones are, it will be quite easy to manipulate the market ratio to the point that you could have, again, one person listing something like right here, the top listing is triple the amount that as the bottom 3, right? If you imagine that happening to a mirror, right? Or to a Hinakora's lock, and you just sort of sit there in a predatory stance waiting for someone to come in, that is potentially an issue. So when I discuss the bad that can come from that with respect to items that are low volume or low liquidity, being potentially highly suspect to manipulation or to organized attempts at manipulation, that is what I meant. I didn't mean for that explanation to take so long, but I think it's an important point. Another problem that I see as being bad potentially is that gold cost is associated with the quantity of currency items, not the value. This punishes things like alterations, but has little impact on things like mirrors or locks. I kind of elaborated on that earlier. Not being able to see the amount of sellers along with the ratio in stock when assessing market price means that whales can quite easily manipulate these indicators for a period of time while simultaneously putting up buy orders that exceed the number that they are selling. Since PoE is in a constant state of inflation, more currency being added than is being bought, this will allow people to do so without buyer recognition, since you don't get the name of this person you're selling. It's completely anonymous. And this also will make it easier to fill because of partial fill orders, meaning that if I put up a buy order for 10,000, it's not like I have to wait for someone to come along who's selling 10,000. The people who are most likely to be susceptible to manipulation and to not look at things or to apply some sort of practical sense to it are more likely to be people who have smaller amounts of things. But because these can incrementally be filled, again, the people who have very large amounts who can offset, right? They might post a dummy amount and lose, a divine or two, but that divine or two loss doesn't mean much to them when they have 1,000 divines. The upside potential is way, way higher than the downside exposure. This is more or less what I just read out there is kind of what I was elaborating on a minute ago. And another bad thing I see is that the max 10 individual buyer sell orders at any given time can be problematic since the gold cost is not refunded if you cancel that order. And therefore it discourages non-market price buy or sell orders. And so what I mean by that is that if you live in, like, let's say Australia or in Asia, or if you're in the part of the world where it has the lower, like that time of the night has the lower player numbers, in the real world, you could use something called a Bollinger Band, which would basically show the volatility or the average trading price 90% of the time. And if the bands were tighter to the moving average, it would tell you that the item is pretty stable. And if they're wider, it would tell you that it's more volatile. And in PoE, typically, the less people that are playing, the more expensive things get. And this is almost universally true. If you go look again on concurrent player numbers, you'll notice that within 24-hour cycles, you always see the up and down and up and down. And if you go and look at the price of certain goods, you'll notice that it always tracks with that as well. Now, because you can buy things and sell things when you're offline, if you're somebody from one of the regions of the world where it's more expensive when you're online, let's say you wanted to buy alterations, since we've been using that example throughout, and the current market price says it's, you can get 18 of them for 1 chaos. But you can see that there's hundreds of listings or for 22 to 1 chaos. Alterations is probably not the best example because people don't care that much with alts, but this could make a much more substantial difference once you get to things like with chaos or divines or locks or mirrors, right? But again, we'll stick with alts just for the purposes of homogeneity. But if you can see that you can get 22 alterations for 1 chaos and you're about to go to bed, and it's only 18 to 1 right now, since the offline asynchronous trading can exist, you go ahead and you put up a buy order for 22 alterations, assuming it'll get filled by the North American hours, right? This is exactly how it probably should work, right? And let's say you come back in, you log in, and you notice that Alts all of a sudden got a little bit more popular, and the price actually dropped to 20 to 1 on North America. And the hours that you're playing, it's actually dropped down to like 14 to 1. So North America still got a better ratio, but you were priced out of the market while you were sleeping. That person isn't doing anything like market manipulation wise. They're not doing anything sort of nefarious. They're not trying to price fix or manipulate at all. It's just that they're perhaps participating in a market that's rather volatile, especially early on. The prices change constantly. And if you're playing in an area where you're getting kind of screwed by your time zone, the fact that you're trying to take advantage of the market as it really should work, you're being directly punished for the fact that you're not buying it exactly at the market price. So if there's a time zone that you live in, if the market price happens to be higher at that time zone, the asynchronous element of the auction house maybe doesn't apply to you as much, really. This is especially the case with things like mirrors and locks too, because with alterations, this is why I was saying alts are a bad example. With alts, because they trade there's so many of them listed, and there's such a high volume. It's not like those are going to fluctuate too much. But if you think about something like mirrors, right? If you post the first mirror that's found in a league, you're setting basically an arbitrary price. In the next 24 hours, there's probably going to be 10 more mirrors posted, right? But there's not going to be 10 more mirror buyers, right? And so each one of these guys is just going to undercut the next guy by like 1 divine or 2 divines or 3 divines. And it's like the first guy who lists it, he's not doing that. Again, that person's not really doing that in any kind of manipulative way or whatever. But because that is a higher ticket item, cutting that down. If you're buying something like that's like 6 to 1, like 4 to 1, let's say like chance orbs early on, right? Dropping that to 3 to 1, that's a proportionately you're losing 33% or gaining 33% or 25% cutting it down, right? But if you're listing a mirror for 250 divs and the next guy goes 249 or whatever, that's 0.4% of a loss, right? And obviously that's such a high ticket item, people aren't going to mind undercutting one another. The fact that those people also lose their gold, again, it discourages that as well, and I think it's punitive. There is some countermeasure in the sense that the gold price seems to be correlated with stack size to punish people, like alterations, again, being very highly liquid. The more liquid things tend to be ones that you'll buy in higher quantities, of course. Obviously, not many people are buying mirrors in stack sizes. But the fact that there's the max 10 individual purchases is kind of irritating, I think, or max 10 buy orders or sell orders, because if you do want to be one of, like, say you're one of those people I mentioned that's in Australia or in Asiatic hours, and you can see that there's these price fluctuations between North American hours and there, and so you want to put up multiple different buy and sell orders just to make sure that you're getting this filled. The fact that you're kind of capped at that potential limit, and you want to give some variability to it to ensure that you can get things, I could see that being somewhat problematic, especially doubling down with the fact that you can lose the gold cost. That's not as big of an issue though than the other ones that were mentioned earlier. So the next thing that we were going to discuss, and this is probably the biggest area, would be the things that are not yet known. So the things that are question marks. And a lot of these are actually pretty. This is probably the most interesting section, and this is probably going to be the area that will affect the game the most. Whether like the way that they decide to implement the things that we're going to discuss here, I think by and large will make or break the success of the auction house. So the first thing that came to my mind: will auction house trading be trackable or traceable through the API like the trade website is currently? Because if people are able to do that, and they are able to develop third-party software or systems the same way that they have with, Awaken Trade and, what else uses the API? PoE Ninja, and, Wealthy Exile, whatever it is. All of those things that are able to use the API to track average prices and blah, blah, blah. If that is possible to be used with the auction house, the benefit that those people will have over having to trade manually, exponentially higher. And I'll give you some examples of things that could be developed or used, and how they implement in the real world. Being able to use something like an RSI, which is the relative strength index, which would basically tell you if something is being overbought or oversold. If something's being overbought, you know that it's likely going to drop down in price soon. If something's being oversold, you know it's likely going to probably bump up in price soon. You could look at moving averages, or you could also look at exponential or weighted moving averages. You could look at Bollinger Bands. We just discussed those, discussing volatility. If you can get certain level 2 indicators somehow. Level 2 indicators would actually be, we did point these out already, but level 2 indicators would be like this, where it's like if you're going on like a trading app, like what's it called, Robinhood or something like that, or on your phone, it's not going to show you all this data. Certain brokers don't give level 2 data. All you can see is what the market price is, similar to how PoE presents it in their video there, right? So again, where it shows, where it just shows market ratio is 15-1, right? The book orders there, that is kind of like level 2 data, but it's very limited, right? It's not telling you the total amount of sellers, who those sellers are, who those are going between, etc., etc. If people are able to track that through the API and they're able to see that sort of stuff as it presents itself right here, right? If they're able to get that kind of information, that could be incredibly powerful. And then, you know, in the real world, you also have things that called like dark pool trading, which is basically off of market trading that exists between usually 2 institutional or large brokers, so that it doesn't affect the market during trading hours or give away a position trading wise. Dark pool trading, as it exists in the game now, I guess, would actually be just using the old trade website or agreeing to trade between 2 people without using the automation side of it. And so the fact that that can still exist, or the fact that that does still exist, obviously opens up several different options. The way that they implement gold costs, and as well the way that they queue priority orders is going to make a really big difference for that. The 2 biggest issues, I think, at the core are prioritizing queue orders, how they're going to do that. We'll talk about that in a sec. And as well, the data that they're presenting and how subject that is to manipulation, in particular for lower volume items. So, yeah, is the auction house going to be tradable or traceable through the, trackable or traceable through the API? That was the first thought that came to my mind in terms of question marks. And image slideshow 2. The good, we touched about the bad. There it goes. The not yet known. So the next thing that is a question mark, will the orders be FIFO? FIFO means first in, first out. So does that mean, like, if you're looking at something like alts or chaos or a highly liquid item, usually there's dozens of orders, if not hundreds of people try to sell something or buy something at the exact same ratio, right? So like, let's say the alterations as they showed in the video, if the 1,500 alterations that are available at 15-1, is that if that's 100 people who are selling just 15 alts, how does it I'm somebody who wants to buy those alterations, how does it prioritize the order of who sells them if we all have the same price? So FIFO, first in, first out, would mean that the person who is, like, whoever listed theirs first would be the first person who would have them sold to them. All right, so if I put in a buy order for 15-1 and 100 people had listed them at 15-1, 15 alts, whoever listed them first, I would buy it from them, and then it would just go down the list like that. Or if it's not going first in, first out, is it being randomized? Now, if it's being randomized, or if it's being first in, first out, how is the trade site going to prioritize filling these orders? Because there is a bit of a conflict of interest between the people using the website and what I imagine would be the practicality from a server side with GGG. Because it would make the most sense from GGG's side if I put in a very large order, like I wanted to buy 1,500 alts, and the first in alterations were 100 orders for 15-1, and then the 101st guy who's selling at 15-1, if he posts a stack of 1,500, it would make more sense to pair the guy selling 1,500 with the guy who wants to buy 1,500, as opposed to doing 500 or 100 individual purchases at 15-1, right? Because that I imagine, I'm not too savvy with computers, but To me, that would make more sense from GGG's end to be able to have to do as few actions as possible instead of as many as possible. But then again, if that were the case, that would mean that the more that you have of something, aka the more that you have total, more susceptible to whales, the higher you could bump yourself in a priority order. Now, along those lines as well, if they're trying to minimize the amount of total actions that are being had, you could also theoretically, and again, this is a question mark, let's say it was 15 to 1 was the cheapest sale price for alterations. If I listed one alteration at 14 to 1, and then I listed, the first thing I would do that second. I would list, let's say, 10,000 alterations at 15 to 1, matching the market price. But let's say there's already 100,000 alts posted there, over 200 people, right? So that means that if it is first in, first out, or depending again how it prioritizes these, that means that 200 people would have to have theirs sold before it's going to pick mine. If I post 10,000 at 15 to 1, and then I post one alteration at 14 to 1, so the first thing that's going to happen the first time someone tries to buy alts, they're going to buy the one alteration that's at 14 to 1. But since it's already done that from one person, right, there's only one alt at 14 to 1. So it's going to go to the next cheapest price, which is 15 to 1. Now, technically, I am also the next cheapest price. It just happens to be that there are 200 people ahead of me in the queue. But because I've already bypassed that queue by being the one alteration at 14 to 1, is it going to just buy the one from me? Or is it going to do the most logical thing and do the least amount of actions possible and then buy the other 10,000 from me, which would allow me to bypass the entire queue, right? If that is a possible thing that could happen, then people are going to do that all of the time, right? They're going to put in one alteration or whatever the currency item is. This would obviously be more prominent with very liquid currency items, but if there's something that is for sale from a lot of people, and I do think this league is probably going to be far more successful than, for example, the Acropolis. But at certain points in the league, the player numbers drop. This happens almost immediately. Obviously, the peak is at the first couple of days, and it just tends to go down from there. But things aren't always as liquid or as high volume as they remain. Even things like chaos and alterations that are, the pinnacle of liquidity as it pertains to PoE, right? And so, if there are 100 people that are ahead of you in a queue, and you're trying to price match the actual market price, and the system is going to be automated, doing something like that becomes a whole lot more practical. But again, without knowing how it's actually prioritizing, is it just doing, again, like a lottery system in terms of who it chooses to buy from or sell from when there's the same price? Is it first in, first out? Does it prioritize the least amount of actions? Does it prioritize the least amount of accounts, etc.? These are all things that are important to know because again, any kind of asynchronous knowledge base there will provide an extreme level of advantage to people who are in the know, and it will leave the people who are not in the know subject to certain elements of manipulation, or if not manipulation, at least to a secondary position within the market. All right, then what else is the next point here? Yes, will the auction house listings also be posted on the trade site so that individual orders can be seen? So like if you put, let's say for example, I have 5 divines and I want to buy 500 chaos. If I put 5 divines onto the auction house and put it up for a buy order of 500C, if I go onto the bulk buying trade site on like pathofexile.com/trade, will that auction house listing also show up there? And so I have the option to be messaged from the person, or if I want to have the option to use the auction house and the trade site, do I actually have to have 10 divines, right? Again, this is probably not as big of a deal for super liquid things like chaos, but this could be a relatively big deal for things like locks or mirrors or things that have a higher price point, right? Like let's say you want to buy one lock and there's 75 divines, and so you put, I want to put my 75 divines for this one lock, and the auction house takes those 75 divs, but it does not show up on the trade site. Having to have an extra 75 divs when you could have potentially got it faster on the trade site, that'd be super frustrating, especially if because you'd have to pay a gold cost to cancel it. So just knowing whether or not that's the case would be beneficial. Boo. Will the auction house prioritize single seller transactions if they have multiple listings? That was the thing that we just talked about. If you have like the one alteration for 14 or the 15, will the auction can a buyer and a seller buy or sell his own currency to himself? That's another important point. This is primarily to combat against manipulation. So like if I posted, the example they have where there's 1,500 posted at 15 to 1, and the next best ratio that they have is 5 to 1, right? And there's 3 of those. It's like if I put that sell order for 1,500 at 15 to 1, and then I'm trying to trap people up, so I put up a buy order for 10,000 at 15 to 1, or even at 14 to 1, maybe trying to get people to essentially how price fixing works now. Would I be fucked in the sense that I would just be buying my own alts, and so I'd be ruining the gold cost? Or does the system prevent you from purchasing your own stuff accidentally? And if so, the people would obviously just maybe put the buy order on a second account, like collude with somebody else. Another thing too is there going to be any kind of preventative measure to prevent? You're allowed to launch and run 2 clients within the same computer. So because it's free to make an account, and because gold cost is being associated with the total number of currency items, not the value of currency items, that means that theoretically I could just open a second client of PoE, get a small amount of gold, whatever, get to level 25, and then I could buy something like a mirror, and I could just buy and sell it back and forth to myself, right? And I could just, like, if you try to price fix to the point, like let's say Mirror's actual market price is 250 divs or something the first week, and you put it for like 20 chaos, obviously that's going to be purchased immediately because there's probably 1,000 people waiting to buy it at like that super cheap price, right? However, if you put it for 249 divs, there might not be, especially if you do this at a lower time, like I mentioned, there's those cycles within the day. If you do that at a lower volume hour of the day, you could probably buy it from yourself before somebody else buys it. Now it's going to show the market price is 249 divs. Then you could just sell it back to yourself at 248 divs, another div lower. Then you do it again, 247, 246, right? And so you can ladder the price down on something, especially if it's not very liquid. And because the gold cost is, again, based on the total amount of them, doing it on a higher ticket item where they're typically lower volume, which would make it easier. It also has a less punitive cost to it. On top of that, your downside exposure is very limited because even if somebody buys it before you're able to buy it from yourself, you're only losing 1 div, right? Whereas your upside potential is like, imagine nobody's buying it for 30 minutes within that price range, right? It's like I could potentially drop the market price of a mirror like 30 or 40 divs, right? And eventually somebody has a buy order that strikes and it's like, oh damn, I wasn't able to buy it for myself. I lost 1 div less than I could have been otherwise. And if you're a whale in the market, so even something like a mirror, like for example, last league, I made 83 raw mirrors in 6 days. If I were using an automated auction house system, now I would never do something like this because I would find it very boring or whatever, but I've seen Janubu link 320 mirrors in a league before. And somebody like that wouldn't care if they got, if they lost off 1 mirror, if you had the possibility of being able to drop the overall mirror price by 20, 30 divs or 20, 30%, right? So is there anything to prevent that? And I probably should have said this first. Another major question is, what is the market price based on? Is it the amount of listings or is it the successful transactions, right? So when it says the market ratio is 15 to 1 because 1,500 are available at 15 to 1, and sorry, I'll bring this up again because I know this video is going rather long. So maybe you've lost it. So you see here how it shows market ratio 15 to 1 because there's 1,500 available at 15 to 1. Is that market ratio based on the fact that there are 1,500 listed at 15 to 1? Or is that based on the fact that that is the average price of the most successful transactions that have actually processed between 2 people, right? And is it weighted in any way, right? Is it just the last successful transaction or is it taking the weighted moving average? So let's say there are 100,000 transactions that are automated in the trade. Is the average sale price of a transaction that has successfully occurred 15 to 1? Or was it just the last one that happened? And this is another very important thing for them to clarify because, again, if it's whether or not it's actually a successful transaction, super important because otherwise you could just get, especially, again, most of these issues exist in markets that are not super liquid or don't have a very high trading volume. But again, the more expensive items are exactly those. And so those are the ones where you would typically have the greatest potential loss, right? Or where a person who is less informed would potentially stand to lose far more. So let's say it's based on the listing price. You could just have a group of 5 people or a guild that has 10 people in it list like Hinakora's locks. I list one at 75D. You list 74. He lists 73. He lists 72. He lists 71. He lists 70. Then you go and look at the order book like that, and it shows the top 5 orders as being 74, 75, 73, 72, 71, whatever, and it shows the market ratio as being 71 to 1. And then you look, and the appearance is given that, oh, well, 71 to 1 seems fair. It's not like there's a massive jump between the second, third, and fourth, and fifth, right? And then that would just be based on listings. Now, if it's based on sale price, if you could also just do the same thing on a low volume market where if 5 people work together, I put one up for 75, you buy it for 75. And then you put one up for 7, you take that same lock and put it for 74, and I buy it for 74. And then I put it for 73, and you buy it for 73, and then 72, and then 71, right? And so if it's just counting the last successful transaction, especially if you have a group of individuals working at the same time like that, and in particular on a low volume or low liquidity item like that, you could very easily trick the market ratio. And the fact that it doesn't tell you the amount of sellers, and the fact that it's unclear whether or not, like, it doesn't show what the weighted moving average is, because let's say over the course of the previous day, 100 locks were sold over 100 individual transactions at 75 to 1. But the last 5 successful transactions were 74, 73, 72, 71. The market ratio, is it taking into account the weighted average, which would be 75 or 74.8 or whatever? Or would it just be 71? Or is it going to look at the listings, which might go down as low as 8, right? So being able to find some clarity there would be very, very important. Again, I know I'm elaborating on these points quite a bit, but I'm just trying to be clear in what the potential implications could be on some of these things, and hopefully draw some clarity from them. Okay. Will the currency put up on the auction house be removed from your API for the regular site purposes? We already went over that, but for example, if I want to buy 1500 chaos at 10 divines at the auction house, and the auction house takes 10 divines from my inventory / stash at the time of listing, will I have to have another 10 divines, so 20 in total, to do that same buy order on pathofexile.com/trade, or will the trade site recognize the auction house listing and reflect that it is there as well? The next one, will the gold cost always correlate with the total number of currency items being transacted, or will it account for the value of the trade as well? In the video, changing 15 alterations to 30 alterations doubled the cost. Will listing 1 mirror cost the same as 1 alteration in gold? Or will the auction house take into account, it obviously will be able to do the math on what the ratios, taking the market price as it dictates it. Like if an alteration is worth 10 to 1 chaos, and a chaos is 100 to 1 divine, so that means alterations would be 1,000 to 1 divine. If you post 1 divine, is it going to be able to just calculate, okay, this is 1,000 times more valuable than an alteration, so it should have a gold cost 1,000 times higher? And if not, is there any intent on doing that in the long run, or is there any kind of scalability being implemented based on the value of the currency, or is it purely always going to be dictated by the amount of them? The next thing that was the question mark is market price based on successful transactions or current listings. Since the gold cost is number of currency items, not the value, could one person list and delist something like a mirror hundreds of times but never actually sell it to impact the average listing price of an item? And this was another thing. If the market price is just taking that based on the amount of listings, right? Like let's say it takes the average price of the last 10 listings. If, as it appears to be the case, if the gold cost is correlated to the amount or the total amount of currency items that are listed, not the value of them, then something like a mirror, it would be no problem, right? Because not many people have multiple mirrors, and so the gold cost presumably would be cut quite low. And since you lose the gold cost when you cancel a transaction, and since the more expensive an item gets, typically the longer it'll take to sell, it won't. In most cases, it won't be immediate. Could a person just post a mirror at, let's say, they're 250 divs, as we said earlier? Could I post one at 249 and then cancel it, and then repost it at 248 and then cancel it, and then post it at 247 and then cancel it right away? Because the gold cost is probably negligible, even if you're even in the mid game or potentially somebody doing illegitimate transactions. Since again the gold cost is associated with the total the total number of them, is that going to have any kind of impact on the market price? And is there going to be anything done to combat that kind of behavior? Now, in terms of that rhetorical or semi-rhetorical question at the end, here are some suggestions that I have based on some of the problems that, or the theoretical problems I just discussed there. And again, I do want to restate that even though I've spent a lot more time talking about potential problems, the question marks, and the potential negative ways this could be used, my overall opinion of this is actually very, very positive. It's just, I think that these things are important to discuss and to clarify, so that you don't have a situation where there's just absolute mayhem and a shit show at the beginning of the league, and so that people can go into this with an equal level of kind of base understanding. Now, of course, some of these things might all actually be just me blowing smoke, and they haven't addressed. Maybe every single issue I've brought up is something that they've already addressed. It's just they, for some reason, when they, I have a hard time believing that, because they have the patch notes, they have the league release, and then they specifically made a video called explaining the currency exchange system. So I feel like some of the things I've brought up, if they were going to do it, it would have been. Oh, and they also did the Q&A with Ziggy, right? So maybe it's possible that some of the things I'm doing, I'm just being an alarmist for no reason. And when it actually gets implemented, a lot of these things will be taken care of. But given the fact that they've had like 4 separate forums, the league announcement, the website /patch notes, the Ziggy D interview, and the now entirely separate video to kind of elaborate on these things, I feel like maybe it's not something that they're going to overtly address. Now, I'm not saying they wouldn't necessarily have overtly addressed it in the implementation, but maybe not have given that information ahead of time. And so here are my suggestions on the basis of what has been presented so far. So that's an important context to have here. I am making all of these suggestions based purely on what we absolutely know to be true right now, not what might act, because again, some of these suggestions might actually be already implemented. They just didn't bother to tell them in their reveal. So do take this with a grain of salt. But based on what we've been presented so far, here are some things I would do to potentially improve the system. To prevent people from laddering down the price of lower volume auction house currency, make the gold cost of canceled transactions increased based on frequency, similar to how global chat mutes how global chat mutes work. So if anyone here has ever been in Global One or Trade One and made a joke or said a swear word or told somebody to go fuck themselves, and you get a message from a game GM being like, you have been muted for 1 hour. You will no longer be able to chat, right? And then sometimes you'll see these posted on Reddit where it's like, you have been muted for 75 days and 46 hours, blah, 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 right? And the reason that happens is because every time you get an additional global mute, it doubles, right? So the first time it's 20 minutes or 15 minutes, next one's 30, next one's 1 hour, the next one's 2 hours, next one's 4 hours, next one's 8 hours, 16, because, or being a repeat offender has an increased punitive measure. Now, in the past, GGG had it so that these global mutes, they were basically just symbolic. You couldn't talk in global channels or global/trade, Trade One or Global One or Global 820 or whatever. But you could still answer DMs and talk in your guild and stuff. They actually recently changed it, so if you get a global mute, you can't do anything. You can't get whispers. You can't talk in your guild. Any of that shit. So it means that if you get an increasing global mute, right, and you've got one of those 72-hour ones, that means you're not trading. You can't buy or sell anything, or obviously through the auction house you might be able to now, but the trade website you couldn't buy or sell anything for 72 hours. And so the fact that they had that compounding punitive measure for what they determined to be a bad action, obviously that would lower the amount of people saying crazy shit, right? And I think that that could be something that they do with canceling trades or relisting the same trade, or potentially if they notice certain accounts trading back and forth to each other, there could be some kind of indicator like that. Mostly the canceling and relisting. That'll also prevent people from, like, let's say I post something, like we're competitively trying to sell a Hinakora's lock, right? I posted 75 and then I see you post one at 74. Oh, I cancel mine because it's only one currency item. I posted at 73. And then you cancel yours and you post it at 72. And I cancel mine and post it at 71. Right? Just because we're trying to undercut each other, maybe we need currency really badly to buy some armor piece or something, right? If you have an increasing, if you don't have some kind of scaling, a punitive measure to prevent that, because the only measure that is in place right now is the total maximum amount of orders you can have up, which is 10 at any given time, right? But it doesn't have a cap on how many times you can buy, like cancel and relist, and it didn't seemingly have any kind of scalable punitive, like gold reduction on the basis of how many times you do that. Another suggestion I had was to tie the gold cost of canceling a listing to the volume of the currency item. Something like a lock or a mirror that has few listing prices. If it's not sold right away, it could have numerous people undercutting, particularly early in the league when the demand will be far outmatched by the supply. Leaving something listed at an antiquated price point will surely lead to it being unsold. However, canceling it and relisting it consumes the gold cost. This is different than something like alterations or chaos, which are very liquid and traded in high volume, where it is far less likely that outdated orders will be possible. Now, I suppose you could make the argument that they already are doing this by attaching gold cost to the total number of things being sold. But since it does have an active market price, it could also tie it to either the volume or to the value of the currency item itself too. I think that when items are lower volume, they're far more likely to be undercut. And so somebody who is canceling a trade to try and to match a market is far more likely. Hello. I just noticed my mic cut out. Sorry, I must have bumped into that. Hopefully that has not been muted for a long time. Holy cow. Oh my god, my heart just started racing. Whew. Oh man. I just noticed my mic has a light that if you touch it, it turns off. And I just noticed that my the light was off. I'm hoping I just bumped into it with my elbow because I'm being animated. Oh, good lord. Okay, anyway, sorry, let me refocus here. Yeah, so again, they do have it currently tied to the volume of something, or sorry, the actual amount of currency items that are being posted or purchased. But it doesn't account for volume. I think something could be done with that. Basically, I think the gold cost should be tied, like the best use of gold is to try and disincentivize either market manipulation or price fixing attempts or illegitimate transactions. But it shouldn't be necessarily used as a punitive measure for people that are just trying to stay active in a very low volume or low liquidity market. That's obviously a pretty hard balancing act, I would imagine. So, maybe they're just taking the best middle ground, but something to consider. The next suggestion, which I think they should do, and this is actually one of the biggest ones I think they should do, is to add a third column to the market ratio when it comes to right here, you see how they have market ratio, then it shows ratio and stock. I absolutely 1,000,000% think that they should add a third column to that says total number of buyers or sellers. So like the fact that is that 15 to 1, 1,500 of those, is that being sold by one person or is that being sold by 100 people? Because that makes a pretty big difference. If it's 100 people selling 1,500 at 15 to 1, far more likely to be representative of the true market value as opposed to seeing, just the one person. I think that is something that would only stand to benefit. The next suggestion was to tie the gold cost. Tie gold cost to value of currency, not simply the amount of currency items, using market value as a baseline indicator of what multiplier should exist. Since you are able to run 2 PoE clients on one computer, a single player could take a low volume, high ticket item like mirrors with next to no gold cost, buy that mirror and sell that mirror to him or herself for 1 divine less than the market value each time they started. This would effectively trick the market ratio indicator, even if it's based on successful transactions and not listings. If another party were to buy that item before they were able to hop on their second account, the downside exposure would only be 1 divine. However, the upside potential is near infinite on times where there is not a pre-existing order present. Next thing I said was to provide some type of indicator to show level 2 data on total number of buyers and sellers for any one currency type to prevent organized group manipulation. Again, that is to combat the things, and I sort of just mentioned this, the level 2 data, which this sort of shows with the amount of orders there, or again, using the here, like the order book, right? So he said in the interview with Ziggy, they're going to show the top 5. So if you look on the left side there with the bids, it would be the one where it goes 800, 789, 338, 1574, 3151. Those 5 would show. So that's like a level 2 data there. But providing an extensive amount of that, or as much of that as possible to the people, to buyers or sellers using the auction house with respect to how many actually individual accounts are there, and not just the total amount of transactions or whatever. Because again, if my guild has 200 people in it, I think most people could probably put a guild together with at least 5 people, right? Because the level 2 data that they're showing, or the order book that they're showing, is always capped at 5. That means that if 5 individual people get together and just buy things amongst each other for any period of time, they could obviously, irrespective of how the market indicator works, unless it's weighted and unless you have that level 2 data to show how many actual accounts are transacting, it's very highly subject to manipulation. So that was the major points I wanted to make there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed some of that. I know I probably repeated myself a few times. It's a little bit hard to have a script on something like this. I am very, very excited for the auction house coming out. I do think this is going to be a great change to the game. Even though this maybe seemingly had a pessimistic tone or an alarmist tone, that's not my intention at all. It's just I want to make sure that this rolls out properly. I do think one of the biggest reasons why Necropolis League was not as successful as it could have been is because it seemed like they didn't play test their own league, right? And so they would have these things that would happen. They'd be extremely OP. Somebody would take advantage of them, and then they would nerf it like a day later. Those people wouldn't get rolled back, and then 95% of the player base felt like they were left behind. And in many cases, they actually kind of were, because of disproportionate purchasing power. When you're adopting or adapting any kind of new technology or new system, obviously players need to test it, especially when it comes to something like an auction house or a market simulator like that. GGG is not going to be able to internally test this themselves amongst 10 employees. Being able to get like that macro data from thousands of people transacting back and forth is very important. And so I do imagine that there's going to be tweaks and changes made throughout. Hopefully nothing that is major. Hopefully nothing like super major where it's like the Necropolis League where it pushes away a large amount of the player base. I do think some of the issues that I brought up tonight, potentially, again, if they haven't been thought of, could have some serious impact. Some of the changes I think I recommended could tie those up pretty nicely. And at the very least, if you did watch this the whole way through, there's some things for you to look out for and pay attention to, when it does get implemented, if it's not addressed in any kind of way. Just keep informed. So I know this is like one of my older videos, hour and 10 minutes. Sorry, guys. Lots of thoughts on this, as I said. So if you did stick through this, I hope you enjoyed. I'm looking forward to the start of next league. Tomorrow is my mother's birthday, so I'm going to be taking tomorrow off. Pretty much this is going to be my last video until the start of next league. I might do some Crafters Cup stuff, but Hopefully my insights and thoughts here provided some value to you. If it did, appreciate if you threw a like on the video and subbed. I also realized that you could turn on post notifications or whatever, so you get alerted every time something comes up. I recommend doing that. A lot of the stuff I post, especially at League Starts, has to do with currency strategies that are, relevant to the market at the time. If you do turn on the post notifications, you'll obviously be the first ones to know, which means you can value extract the market before everyone else. GG, winning, win-win, right? Anyways, guys, I will link a document below as well that gives a written version of what I just said there, or it would be the same thing that you would see in this image here, basically, but written in a Google Doc. As well, if you didn't check out that first video, I will link that below, and I'll put a link to the announcement on GG's end. All right, guys, so looking forward to the next league. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or any things that you think I missed or that I'm overblowing, feel free to comment below and let me know what you think. And I check and read all of the comments on YouTube, so I will be sure to get back to them, and I'm sure I'll argue with more than one of you, but it's all love. I know we all love this game, so we just want the best, or I do at least, and I know most of you feel the same way. So looking forward to it, guys. Talk to you soon. Peace.